Hey guys, Dr. Decks here. Today we are installing decking. So this video is about how to install deck boards. Now there's several different ways you can install decking, but the one way I know of that is the absolute best way to fasten a deck board is by screwing through the decking into the framing and then plugging the hole that you make or leaving the screw flush to the top of the deck board, okay? So what we're doing today is we're using TimberTech AZEK decking. We're using some Cortex screws that they have for, they're stainless steel, they have for the deck boards, and we're taking them and we're driving them deeper into the decking with a plug setting tip that comes with these screws, and then we're gonna put little corks called Cortex on top of that. But before we get into all that, let's just talk a little bit about how we're gonna do this and why. So this deck was pre-existing. The frame was in pretty good shape, so we said, okay, we're gonna keep the frame, we're gonna restructure it a little bit, we're gonna put new joist tape over the top of all of the joists, and then we're gonna install new decking on top of that. And so all the reframing's been done, all the joist tape's been done. We're into the point of installing the deck boards, and we have some installed. So we're well on our way to completing this deck, but now's a good time to introduce you guys to how we're gonna do this particular method of installing decking. So this is, I would call this a face screw method, a Cortex method of deck board installing. Some people, maybe it's not for you. A lot of people use clips. I do too. But when I do use clips, I always pin the ends with the same techniques that I'm doing with this entire deck. But the reason we're not doing clips here is because we want these boards to be pinned completely to this frame. Because it's an older frame, we want to make sure that there's no movement laterally, right, left, backwards, forward, whatever. So we're gonna go ahead and face screw everything, Cortex it, and then we'll put the plugs in once we have all the face screws installed. I thought we'd just go through this technique with 5 boards so you guys get the idea, and then we'll go from there. All right, so the first thing you have to have when you're doing this is some way to space your deck boards. We're using 2 different methods and at the same time. We're using one thing called a deck divider, and this deck divider has 5 adjustable parts that are adapted over to an Irwin clamp, okay? And they move back and forth. And if you've seen my videos, you kind of know we just started using this tool, and we thought, okay, well, let's do it professionally as if we're installing a deck. You know, I gotta be honest, it's a little more convenient to use one of these than it is to use random orange spacers like the ones behind me, and our other alternate clamping method, which is basically this clamp with a couple of deck adapters on the ends without any of these, and then we use these other orange spacers to make up the gap. So there's a couple different ways. There's other companies that are selling different types of spacers and different types of clamps. There's another one called Viking Arm. There's a few others on the market, but for today, we're gonna use what we have, and it's gonna be the deck divider, which is adapted to an Irwin clamp. And then we're gonna use also some of our orange deckmate spacers with the Deckmaster J clips. We also have some adapted over on our Irwin clamps that were made by Irwin, but they no longer make or sell those. So if you have some of those are oldies and goodies. I have several sets of those as well. We've also used some new clamps with the Deckmaster J clamp system as well. So you can reach out to him on the internet and get your own sets made for those Irwin clamps, or DeWalt clamps as well, I believe. We lay 5 deck boards at a time. That's what I like about this method is sometimes with a clip system, certain clip systems, you can only lay 1 deck board at a time. This one's very quick. We're gonna lay out 5 boards. We're gonna get all the clamps set. We're gonna cinch everything together. We're gonna pin the ends, and then we're gonna chalk a line so we have nice straight lines, and then we'll go on to the next set of boards. So that's what the next step is. So here we go. We have 5 boards ready to go. We already have a board that's pinned, it's face screwed, it's already installed. So that's gonna be our leverage board. This last board that's already installed, it's not gonna move when we put clamps against it. So we're gonna use that as our leverage board. So we're gonna be basically installing 5 boards, but we're clamping 6 boards together because you have to have a way to install these 5 boards here, and you have to have a way to be able to clamp it with something that's already straight and that's tight. So that's what we're gonna do, is use this board as leverage, and we're gonna install these every other joist. So I like to put a little bit of a gap in between my deck boards, And then I'll just bring this tool out like so, and then I can shove these down in between, and now I have nice equal gaps. But the trick is, the gaps are good, but they're not perfect yet. So once I cinch on this clamp, like so, it just brought everything together in this set. So now this area for these two joists is perfectly gapped, perfectly spaced, and ready to be installed. So now we just have to go back and do that with the rest of our system. Now, with this system over here, and you might be asking me, well, why aren't you just using these? Well, we could. We could just use these only, but we only have 4 of them. And we need 8 to do a 20-foot board. So instead of using 4 and moving them, we're going ahead and clamping up the entire run, because the gap that this tool leaves and the gap that this tool leaves is the same size gap. It's 3/16 of an inch. Okay, even says it right here on the plate of the deck mate, 3/16. If I put this gap right here, it's the same gap. And that goes for each one of these. So has a pretty nice fit. And it's gonna be minimally different, possibly a little bit different using these versus these. In the future, we'll probably use all of these because they are just more convenient where you're not crawling around and having to install. Let me show you, for example. So we'll take these and we'll have to pull them all out of the decking and then replace them like so. Then we take one of these clamps. This is an older clamp, but it has those old school Irwin deck clamp, deck adapter kit. I think that's what they called it, a deck adapter kit. And then I'm gonna put that, and same technique. You can see this gap right here is way too big, right here. So as I cinch on this, it's gonna bring all the deck boards together, and then I'm gonna give it just a little more love. If you give it too much force, it'll try to pull that outside board up. We don't really wanna do that, but we just wanna have a nice equal cinched gap so that all these boards stay tight. Now we're gonna move over here, and we're gonna grab this. And I've been told by the manufacturer to take these out, you can just roll them over and they just pull right out. So then I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna start feeding these and pull my clamp back a little bit to make sure that it's in the gap. These are all dropped in the gap, and then I'll go ahead and cinch the board. And you can see this board's starting to lift a little bit because we got a lot of pressure on it, but these are nice and snug. Okay, all of our areas are equally spaced and we're ready to start fastening. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put one screw in the very front board, the leading edge, I'll call it. We're gonna put one screw here on each spot, each joist. What that does is it pins everything together. So even if the clamp wants to come loose, it won't, because the board's gonna be pinned on this far end, okay? We're gonna go ahead and pin it, and then after each joist is pinned, we're gonna chalk a line. And why do we chalk lines when we're Cortexing a deck? Because I still want a really accurate looking line. So if you're laying on the deck and you look down, you're like, oh wow, those lines are really straight. They're not all jig and jagged and looking bad. They're like nice, clean, crisp lines. So as a professional, we take a lot of pride in the finer things, the finer details of the deck build. We're gonna go ahead and pin this end. That's the next step in our journey of laying this deck. So we'll get that done, and then we'll go ahead and start chalking. Okay, now that the leading edge is fastened, we're gonna go ahead and chalk those chalk lines off so that we have nice straight lines for us to finish pinning all the screws into the decking. So we'll get that done, and then we'll start screwing this whole thing off. All right, now that our lines are all chalked off and they're nice and straight, we're gonna go ahead and just start driving screws until every space that we need to put a screw in is done. And then we'll just continue that process over and over and over until we're done laying the decking. All right, so TimberTech, AZEK, in conjunction with Fasten Master, make these Cortex plugs. This says AZEK Deck Coastline. That's the color of the decking we're installing. So they make color match plugs. You get on a roll and they're all collated like so. So there's 4 strips. So there's 80 plugs in one of these sets, and then we just pull one of those away. A couple tips I do. The first thing I do is I look at the plugs and make sure they're all running straight or perpendicular to the collation. So I can see one right here that's a little angled. I like to just quickly straighten those out with my fingers before I do anything else with this set of plugs, because it matters when you're installing them. It speeds things up a little bit. And then I always take these and I wind them around my finger, because the way they're packed, they want to curl this way. And I want them to curl this way. It makes it easier to install them when they're curled down like this. So now that I have these plugs faced and curled the way I want, I have a mallet, and I'm gonna just take the mallet and I'm gonna start tapping these into the holes. When I have a line done or whenever I feel like it, then I'll start tapping all those in. Once I get those done, we'll just keep going. So, like I said before, this is the best way to fasten a deck down to a frame. I don't care how else you do it, what your thoughts are, there's no bones about it. If you're face screwing decking with a stainless or a carbon screw and you're doubling up on every joist, there's no better way to secure a deck board to a frame, okay? So here we go. I'm gonna take my plugs, and I'm not going to put any plugs in my leading edge, because once you put these in, they kind of disappear, okay? So we're gonna do a few, and I notice I have the grain pointed in the same direction as the grain on the decking, because if you do it opposite, it doesn't look very good. You can spot them a mile away. But if you do it right, and then you tap them in, they pretty much disappear, okay? Now we're within a foot of the plugs, and I can barely see them. So if I plug this hole right here and I go to install my next deck board, I'm gonna be sitting here like this going, where's that plug? Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. But when you're standing 6 feet up, you can't even see these. So that's how well, because basically Fasten Master is taking AZEK product and they're making these right out of the same deck board that we're installing. That's why these plugs look so good, because it's the exact same product. Once that's done and you get all your plugs in, your decking is installed. So if you like this video, and I forgot to ask you at the beginning of it, don't forget to click that subscribe button, please. Hit that bell icon if you want to be notified when we're putting out new content. Don't forget to leave me a comment below and let me know what you think of this installation method of how to install decking. And thanks for watching, guys. We really appreciate it. Have a great day.